I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which this podcast is recorded, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror.
Dark Mirror with Jessicka Anne.
Welcome to Dark Mirror. It is me, your host, Jessicka Anne, and today I wanted to talk to you about the increasing politicization of pop culture, the impacts of that on identity coherence, and our ability to change. A bit of a mouthful, however, for those of us that are in the business of people, whether or not that is in change work or in positions of leadership, it's really important for us to start to understand the impacts of this in our ability to lead others. As modern media is largely now defined by personalized algorithms, we are existing increasingly inside echo chambers that are affirming specific worldviews. And while living in Western democratic societies, there has always been a degree of political binary around more progressive or conservative worldviews. Now more than ever, as these identity tunnels are being reaffirmed through these personalized algorithms, these things are also shaping our values hierarchies, the paradigms through which we are viewing the world, and our ability to connect with one another. And so in the discussion today, I really wanted to pick apart the impacts of these identity tunnels, how it can lead to tribalism. And for those of us that are here to support people to reach their potential, to act from agency, how do we support people to reorient to their own moral compass? What is the cost if we don't? And also, where can we take ownership of our own participation inside these silos and perpetuating what they breed? I feel like as a pop culture example of this increasing politicization of pop culture, if you're anything like me, you're a fan of the show South Park. I have been for most of my life. And the creators came under heat for this last season about how political it felt in contrast to seasons that they've had in the past. Now, the team has never shied away from poking fun at whatever politics is happening at the time. However, this season felt particularly pointed. And so when asked about it, the response, I think, was very reflective of what's going on. Because one of the things to know about how that show is produced is that each episode is turned around in a week, which is part of why I feel that's remained such a pulse point and something that's really plugged into the zeitgeist despite running for the last 30 years. And so when asked why this last season was so political, Trey Parker made the observation that they have always been cultural commentators, and politics is now culture. And I think he's really hit the nail on the head. So I really want to look at this through three lenses today. Why is this happening? What's it costing us? And what can we actually do about it? I cannot remember a time in my life where I have known more about political figures than I do now. I remember back when people were talking about Brad and Angelina, much in the same way that we now talk about political figures. Politics has moved from something that we engage in as a civic duty to being something that we are defining our identity by and also consuming as a form of entertainment. And this inevitably has an impact in terms of how we are relating to it. And the reason I wanted to speak into this is that we have an opportunity to really determine the direction that we go from here, because we are at risk of a generation of people that are more fluent in outrage than they are in discernment. And that means it's going to impact our ability to have constructive dialogue and make decisions that better the whole. We also recognize that a lot of people are just opting out. People are getting politically apathetic, which itself has its own risks. How does that then ripple through to the way that they feel about their agency and the rest of their lives? And if we ultimately lose our ability to understand persuasion and also to understand how to compromise, is democracy a feasible reality into the future? Now, these might sound big societal collective level topics, but if you have someone sitting across from you that has only ever existed in a reality that continues to affirm their current viewpoint, how likely is that person to be open to change? Curiosity and compassion are key elements to any effective transformational process. And if we are existing inside ecosystems that don't model that, don't encourage that, we remain more rigid. And that which is over rigid inevitably crumbles. Now, there are a lot of threads we can pull on here around how politics has become pop culture. If we look back, this is part of why we always had the celebrity gossip columns and all of the speculation around who was dating who and who had had an affair and who had been divorced. But why is politics scratching a specific itch for us now, as opposed to what pop culture used to do then? My suggestion is it's the death of the monoculture. We are no longer consuming content from the same celebrities altogether. However, we are existing in cultures that are impacted by politics. Naturally, we're interested. It's a point of connection, even if it is driving division. And also, if we look at the increasing amount of uncertainty, of course, there's always been degrees of uncertainty, but the availability of information about what's happening at a global level, driving our awareness of the impacts of things such as artificial intelligence, climate change, all of these factors driving an underlying anxiety in a population that is increasingly isolated. Is it that we are archetypally looking to erect heroes and kings to create some kind of soothing, particularly in a largely secular society? We could go down a rabbit hole around why the resurrection of a lot of these monotheistic religions seems to also be paralleling this need for certainty. And of course, there's another more sinister possibility, is that there are people that have agendas around how our attention is being directed. You look at billionaire funding, dark money, money that is put into political campaigns that is also then invested in pushing specific media agendas. It's not just what we see on television or hear on radio anymore. These are also what are fueling our algorithms. Add that to existing inside a post-truth landscape where we are existing in a swamp of information and misinformation side by side. People often revert to a degree of tribalism to sort through the noise. While you're still trying to lead your day to day life, it's not always available to you to have the luxury of time to look into things. And so having people that tell you what to think or how to think about it can be a comfort. And so, just like anything, what we end up seeing is a split. We have people that are becoming increasingly politicized, while others are becoming increasingly disaffected by the political system. Either way, this is impacting our ability to participate in a way that is functional. And regardless of what this does at a civic level, that has an impact around how we feel able to engage in our communities, in our collective. And if we pull back for a moment from this political impact directly, like I mentioned before, existing inside these identity tunnels, these things that are reaffirming specific worldviews, these are often what latch onto existing wounds inside us. Broadly speaking, we can look at the division of political ideology into daddy politics or punitive parent and mummy politics or nurturant parent. And depending on your relationship with these two archetypal energetics, how you relate politically is often reaffirming or acting as a coping mechanism to deeper underlying anxieties around our relationship with either or. Say, for example, you're someone that has an extremely strong inner critic. What does it then reaffirm to you if you end up in an identity tunnel that is consistently affirming the need to punish and be harsher on specific individuals in society? Alternatively, if you are someone that has been over nurtured, is in a space where you potentially lack boundaries and are a bit of a bleeding heart, what does it reaffirm to you if you're consistently being fed information about society's ills? These are impacting our abilities to grow, not just as a collective, but individually. So, what do we do about it? It's all very well and good to point out that this is happening and its potential implications. But how do you support someone that is existing inside an environment that is continuing to reaffirm this version of reality to them? I myself, in my own business, have seen clients fall into online rabbit holes, whether or not that is down the conspiracy route or even down the self-optimization route, which in and of itself has its own political leanings. And both of these rabbit holes impacted these individuals much in the same way, even though on the surface, the content itself looked quite different. Both of them were getting them to focus outside of their locus of control. Even inside that self optimization rabbit hole, there is always more to optimize, there is always more that can be done. And as a result, not actually allowing them to be present with where they truly are and even metabolize and implement a lot of what they were consuming. For the person that had fallen down that conspiracy theory rabbit hole, its subtle energetic undercurrent, which we spoke a bit about in the episode of Dark Mirror with Carly Ryan, is that it perpetuates this drama triangle that there is a persecutor or an aggressor, a rescuer, and a victim. And so, for this specific client, they were continually putting themselves in that victim position and getting suspicious around what was lying around every corner, which was really impacting their ability to focus on what was meaningful to them that was immediately in front of them. And so, in terms of helping deconstruct these identity or reality tunnels that were reaffirming these identity constructs for these two clients, one of the things that I pointed out was how this consumption that they were falling into was impacting their ability to create. Often we talk about creation over consumption in terms of content, but this is even applying into our day to day lives. And so when I was able to find that values alignment with what is meaningful to them and what it was costing them, then I was able to suggest a media diet, because often we are in these spaces of unconscious consumption rather than being intentional about what we're consuming, why we're consuming it, how we're metabolizing it, and allowing it to translate into action. I have also done this for myself. I have gone through and audited all of the media that I was consuming and the emotional states that it was putting me in repeatedly. Because, of course, I don't want to encourage you to be putting your head in the sand. But if you are finding that the media and the way that you're consuming it is repeatedly putting you into states of apathy or disaffectedness or rage, is this the best place for us to respond from long term? Sometimes these emotional states, rage in particular, can be the impetus to act. But if we're entering into a negative feedback loop that isn't actually affirming action in a positive direction, we're just continuing to reactivate our system and our wounds as a result. And so for these clients, post media diet, the changes were marked. This client on the self optimization route, reducing his content consumption, focusing on creation, focusing on applying his learnings, his business grew, his ability to communicate and to show up online amplified. He landed more clients and his focus improved. And the shift wasn't about caring less, it was caring about the things that he could actually touch in his reality. And as for my client that was getting stuck inside the conspiracy theory rabbit holes, for him, his sleep improved, he was able to focus on managing his team better, and overall, he was finding himself engaging more in his community. Does that mean that we don't want to engage in activism? Not at all, but what we want to recognize is that this part of our participation at a civic level is just a part. When we start to define our entire personality by it, when it starts to be the lens that we're consistently applying to look at our reality and the things that matter, often it becomes prohibitive. Truthfully, I feel like it's important for us to develop our civic mind rather than be pulled into pop culture identity politics. So, my invitation for you and what I have found useful for myself is to really get clear on my own values. Politically, what matters to me? What reality am I wanting to contribute to? What am I wanting to leave behind? And is the way that I want to go about it loving? I mean, I know it might sound a little bit spiritually cliche, but if not love, then what? And if not love, why not? If the solution is always more pain and more hate, is it the most appropriate solution? And is it possible for us to actually look deeper? Just to be clear, love doesn't always look like coddling. Sometimes tough love is what's needed. But let's get clear on whether or not the intention is loving. Coming back to my point at the start of this episode about looking at our own participation inside these silos and the impacts that they are having. You guys probably would have heard me say this before, but we can only ever lead someone to the depths with which we have led ourselves. And if we aren't looking at our own biases inside of these echo chambers, that's definitely going to impact our ability to see reality through other people's eyes, to be able to enter into their world and truly meet them. And so, my invitation for you is first of all to purge, to unsub, unfollow, vote with your eyeballs, to start to recreate the information that you are being fed, what you are consuming intentionally. Also, challenge your biases. Look at to consume media outside of your own ecosystem. I consumed a post the other day that led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole around Pauline Hanson. She's a figure that personally I do not politically align with. She does not share the same values as me. However, I am aware of what media spin is, and I still make an effort to educate myself around people's points of view within reason, not things that are going to be pulling me outside of the things that are actually of value for me to be contributing to. And also get really curious about the culture that you are creating and participating in, because we are already always creating a culture from being in a position of leadership. So, what sort of culture are you modeling to yourself, to your clients, to your family? And what values are you fostering inside that culture? Because that is going to have an inevitable ripple effect as a supplement or even an antidote to these identity tunnels. And my last invitation for you is to get imprinting or be imprinted. When we are coming back to our own moral compass, when we're looking at the things that are valuable to us, the culture that we're creating, the communities that we are participating in, the things that we want to leave behind, showing up for those things is really important. And I don't just mean posting on social media or the accounts that we follow, but the actual steps that we're taking into our real world. I feel a remedy and an antidote to a lot of the neurosis and disempowerment that we are experiencing is that we are isolating ourselves from community. And so, even if you are someone like myself that tends to run a little bit countercultural, I actually do believe in the human system. And the institutions and systems and governments are really things that have emerged out of this system. And often as a result of our inability to participate effectively. And so, if we want a different outcome, it's up to all of us to get informed, get imprinting, to vote with our eyeballs, our hearts, and our feet. I would love, if you have loved this episode, to hear some feedback from you. Feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. Please rate the show, share it, and tune in next week for my episode with relationship expert Susie Kim, where we dive into the disillusionment around modern dating and how to stop living inside the myth of the one.